My name is Milton Mermakides, and it's a great pleasure to present to you today the Sound Asleep project. It's a collaboration with Professor Deborah Skeen and several other eminent sleep scientists. It involves the translation of various types of sleep data into sound and music. As such, it belongs to disciplines such as data sonification, auditory display, database music, and other fun-sounding stuff. So I'll talk a little bit about this process, why and how I do it, before looking at sound asleep in detail. My father was a nuclear physicist, and I spent my formative years when he worked at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, amid this wonderful discovery of the fabric of the universe. At the same time, I fell deeply in love with music, and to me, I didn't see much difference between the discovery of the universe that my father was undertaking and the discovery of music and its profound effect on me and on all of us. And so these have been intrinsically linked in my work, even though it took a long time for the education system and me to remarry these disciplines of music and science. While it is perfectly common for musicians to use scientific, mathematical, and geometric representations of music, the reverse is not the case, where music and sound are used to represent scientific data. However, I can't help notice how similar some of my musical analyses look to my father's representations of particle physics, suggesting some kind of possible connection between the two. The fact that music can be more than itself has a long history. Composers have long been embedding information in their scores and music, such as the Baroque composer J.S. Bach, whose last name happened to spell out a four-note melody in the German notation system. He used this melody in his music, most notably in his incomplete Art of the Fugue, where it appears one of the last things he wrote, signing off in a way. Other composers have used a similar cryptogram system. And we could even turn the letters of world sleep into a melody of our own. While the translation of names and letters into music might be considered a form of tribute or compositional challenge, there long exists a concept and a pursuit of representing more meaningful scientific data as music, such as Pythagoras's harmony of the spheres and Kepler's representation of orbits as musical scales. As our ways of collecting data and making music expand, so too does this discipline of musical representation. Here I've taken the orbits of the solar system and sped them up so fast that they enter the rhythmic domain, as well as producing a chord, a harmony, directly communicating the delicate system which we inhabit. Here is Mercury, high and fast, then Venus, a little slower and lower, our home Earth, Mars, and and so on. A really lovely example is Villa-Lobos's New York Skyline Melody, which takes the architecture of New York and converts it into a piece of music, so that the architecture of the city is translated directly into its musical lines and features. It's not just planets and buildings that we can translate, of course. We can even turn the musical eye to our own bodies. As Rilke suggests, if we convert the coronal suture, that wiggly line on our skulls that looks like a groove of a record, into music, what sounds would emerge? I did just this in 2004, and it felt like plucking an unheard melody from the universe. And when I was under treatment for leukemia, the motion of my daily blood cells became the autobiological story of my disease and eventual recovery. I have since undertaken hundreds of collaborative projects, turning all manner of data and patterns into music, including colours from images and paintings, physical processes like salt crystallizing, traffic patterns, voting activity, how disease spreads, the colours of the Ukrainian flag, climate change, the motion of a spider's web, mathematical and geometric processes, and mutations of the COVID-19 genome. And this brings us to Sound Asleep. Sound Asleep started when Professor Deborah Skeen, Deborah and I met at the University of Surrey in a panel with Jim Al-Khalili, and we discovered a mutual interest in novel scientific representation, particularly for the visually impaired. In the arts and literature, there has long been a connection between music and sleep. Perhaps because of its profound but subconscious and subliminal effect on us. It's an important part of our lives that we don't fully understand. There are many pieces named Reverie and Nocturne for this matter. But we wanted to move beyond this abstract representation and really use sound and music as a way of directly communicating important data and concepts. Sleep data is presented to us in a number of ways and time scales. From when we go to sleep and wake up over a number of days, to a sleep experience through the night, to the moment when we fall asleep. And here we'll look at all of those time scales. Deborah Skeen's work is concerned with when we go to sleep in relation to our melatonin. Melatonin is regulated by sunlight, and so for visually impaired people, there are potential problems with the synchronization of our body clocks with the day clock. Furthermore, all people have a slightly longer body clock, 24.5 hours, compared to the 24 hours of the day. So left to our own devices, we tend to stay up later and later. This, in musical terms, is known as phasing, and is a device that is used in many compositions where a musical figure is delayed against itself to create interesting and dissonant musical experiences. So these sleep maps that Deborah and I had show a number of things. They show the body's circadian rhythm against the day clock, when the melatonin peak occurs, and subsequently when we sleep at night and any daytime naps that might occur. When things are synchronized, aided by sunlight, we note that these are clocked into time with no drift. However, in the absence of melatonin control, you can see this drift that occurs. How might we represent this musically? Well, there are a number of analogies. The 24-hour clock is actually well represented by a 24-beat cycle, which the Shona tradition of Zimbabwe use. Since this 24-beat cycle is intended to induce a dreamlike state, it seems very appropriate to use it here. You then might be able to hear the two clocks of the body and the Earth's rotation, either being in phase or desynchronized. We can also articulate when the melatonin peaks happen with a bell-like tone, when nighttime sleep occurs with a violin, and daytime naps with interrupted pizzicato sounds. Thus, a well-synchronized person would sound like an orderly musical progression, consonant and balanced rhythmically. However, let's now listen to a subject with an abnormal circadian phase. You'll see and hear that even though they are attempting to sleep each night, it is challenged by this drifting clock, forcing daytime naps, but also an uncomfortable desynchronization, which you can hear in the fluttering rhythmic instability. These sleep maps give us vivid representations of when we sleep, when we wake up, and why. However, we can dive deeper into sleep and observe what's happening during a night's sleep. To do so, we can look at polysomnography. That is the tracking through sensors of a variety of biological data during sleep, such as sleep state, body movement, breathing, and oxygen transfer. These PSG charts look like this: time running from left to right, and a number of events in layers. This, to me as a musician, is exactly like an orchestral score. Different instruments playing in events with time running from left to right. So we can simply use these PSG charts as scores, assigning instruments to each of these lines. For example, whether we sleep or not and how deeply can be represented by a flute. A flute is useful because it is very clear how long a sleep lasts, as opposed to a piano note, which dies quite quickly. I've assigned depth of sleep to lower notes. You fall asleep. Oxygen transfer I've assigned to the strings. A nice open transfer of oxygen is an open, spacious chord. But as it gets constricted, it becomes more clustered and dense. Other events during our sleep include interruptions in our breathing patterns. These interruptions are musically represented as pizzicato and percussion. They're short and sharp. We also move during a night's sleep, and this is mapped onto a bass line. A peaceful night's sleep involves a nice peaceful bass line, whilst thrashing around in bed will create similar uncomfortable musical figures. Finally, snoring and periodic leg movements are assigned to timpani and woodblock, and I'm not sure why. What's remarkable here is that we can essentially feed in the PSG chart of a nice, enviably normal sleep. And what comes out is like lush film music, peaceful and serene. Even when the subject wakes, they fall back quickly into a deep sleep. The trills at the top, incidentally, represent REM, dreaming. Now let's listen to a subject who has apnea, breathing issues, which not only compromise the oxygen transfer, creating these dense string clusters, but also frustrate their ability to fall asleep. And a subject with restless leg syndrome can see their frenetic movement and how the melody never resolves, as they are never given enough peace to fall fully asleep. The subject, incidentally, forgot to put the sensor on, so you get this lovely gliss when they do. Here, the musical dissonance echoes the uncomfortable experience. What's remarkable here is all these examples use exactly the same translation system. It's the data that changes the music, and, to me at least, echoes beautifully the inner experience. So we've looked at when we sleep, subject to our melatonin, also how we sleep through a night. But let's dive deeper and look at what's happening in our brains during sleep. Inside our brains are a number of waves operating at different frequencies and intensities. And in fact, electronic musicians use frequency and amplitude as their core musical material. So this invites a direct translation of brainwaves EEG data into sound. And we can map a lot of these into the pitch domain. If our brains are vibrating at 100 hertz, say, we can map that to a sound wave vibrating at a similar rate. Brainwaves, in fact, operate in different bands, named after Greek letters. In these examples, you will hear the top, bottom, and middle of the gamma band, then of the beta band of wavelengths, and finally the alpha band, which I'm not sure you can hear the lower range on those speakers. However, brainwaves go deeper still. How can we map these? In fact, we can experience these waves not in terms of pitch, but in terms of rhythm. What I've done here is taken a sound and I'm changing its volume at the rate of beta, alpha, and then very slow theta and delta waves. And you can hear how music provides a very visceral and accessible experience of these wavelengths. By using such methods, we are able to listen to the brain during a night's sleep. And I've done this in the next example. What you will hear is the brain slowing down as we fall deeper asleep, but rising in pitch and activity during dreaming. I've taken snapshots through the night, but this is real-time brain activity during sleep, taken from a subject like you and me. Current research by Professor Morten Kringelbach and his team show that underpinning this choreography of falling asleep is in fact a complex map. We have various states of sleep, and it's not just a question of falling down into sleep, but through an almost maze-like sequences of trajectories, loops, dead ends, which is pretty much what sleep sometimes feels like. There are in fact 19 states, and you can think of these as nodes on a map or a flow diagram. When Morten showed me these, suggesting I translate them into music, I was struck by how similar they looked to harmonic sequences, patterns of chords we find in music, which share this similar network approach. Some chords are more connected than others feel like leaps, and not all directions are equal. In fact, composers use, often subliminally, maps like these to create numerous pieces of music. So I did just that and remapped this so-called sleep transition map onto a sequence of chords which share similar relationships and relevant proximities and trajectories. So our starting point of D minor will end at A major through a circuitous pathway. I'll present to you just one, but do remember that we can make countless pieces of music, and essentially we do make countless pieces of music when we fall asleep each night. Why translate sleep into music? Or why do any of this sonification or data-driven music craft at all? For me, there are a number of reasons, including the wonderful collaborations, friendships have formed, exchanging of ideas and collaborative networks towards a sort of meta-understanding of life, blending so-called scientific and artistic disciplines. I also get musical ideas from these sort of translations that I wouldn't have with the limited amount of music that exists. Sometimes composers are too enamored of their own imaginations, and we can get vastly more from the world around us. Thirdly, it's highly cathartic. I found that in my own translations of my leukemic experience, but also in the sounding out of otherwise hidden experiences of our fellow humans and animals. It adds to the cascade of scientific tools and representations, the sonic, not just the visual, which opens accessibility and ways of knowing. And finally, it can provide insight, a sort of sonic graph or analysis that harnesses our extraordinary ability to listen and appreciate music in order to deeply understand the world. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you have a great day and a wonderful night's sleep.